Okay, how did you get shot? My grandma shot me. Your grandpa shot you? My grandma. I went inside. No.
These grandparents have just committed the unthinkable, a heinous act that would shatter families and send shockwaves through a community. From the frantic screams of tearful grandmothers to the trembling voices of devastated grandfathers, these real 911 calls offer a chilling glimpse into the aftermath of a senseless killing.
Where were you shot at? Where are you shot? Your chest? Okay, who, are your grandparents still there? No. Where did they go? I don't know. They shot you though, right?
The courtroom was filled with emotion as the 911 tapes were played for the first time. Sandra Lane, a 74-year-old woman from Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, sobbed uncontrollably as she listened to the panicked voice of her grandson, Jonathan Hoffman, who was desperately trying to call for help. In the recording, Jonathan can be heard gasping for breath and telling the 911 dispatcher that his grandmother had shot him 5 times. He said he was going to die and begged for help.
I went inside. No.
The 911 operator asked,
Where were you shot at? Where are you shot?
and Jonathan responded that he had been shot in the chest.
911, what's your emergency? Where? Who? I've just been shot. Where are you at? In what city? West Bloomfield. Okay, how did you get shot? My grandma shot me. Your grandpa shot you? My grandma. I went inside. No. Okay, we're going to stay on the phone with me, okay, sir? I'm going to get help on the way. Okay? Help. Where were you shot at? Where are you shot? Your chest? Okay, who, are your grandparents still there? No. Where did they go? I don't know. You don't know where they went? They shot you though, right? Okay, stay on the phone, okay? Sir? Are you there?
Sandra Lane sat there, head bowed, sobbing throughout the recording. Her attorney, Jerome Zabata, explained that she killed someone she loved and tried to save, and now she was in her own personal hell.
She killed the person that she loved that she tried to save. There are no winners. She's in her own hell.
But the question on everyone's mind was, why would Sandra shoot her own grandson? According to Zabata, Sandra had become afraid of Jonathan because she suspected he was using synthetic marijuana, also known as K2 or spice. Toxicology reports would later confirm that the drug was present in Jonathan's system at the time of his death. This was not the first time that the police had been called to Sandra's home regarding Jonathan. In March, they responded to a domestic disturbance call, but no charges were filed. Also in March, Jonathan was pulled over and ticketed for possession of marijuana and drug paraphernalia. He later received a suspended sentence and probation. On the day of the shooting, police were called to Sandra's home again. When they arrived, they found her standing outside with her hands up, screaming that she had murdered her grandson. Several officers took the stand and testified that they heard 2 or 3 more shots from inside the house after they arrived.
She would scream to me that I murdered my grandson.
ABC News legal analyst Dana Cole pointed out that even if Jonathan had been under the influence of drugs, he was on the line with 911 and additional shots were fired, indicating that he was not posing a threat at the time.
He was on the line to 911 when 3 additional shots rang out, so obviously he did not pose a danger at that time.
She was always a thorn in my side, to be very honest. She was very difficult, very meddlesome, very controlling, and I never liked her.
Sandra Lane was really trying to get me to send him back, and she said she would take good care of him, and she promised she would take good care of him and that he would be happy. staying there with his friends and finishing out his last year of high school. And she never, ever once told me that there were issues.
Sandra Lane is currently being held without bond and faces life in prison if convicted.
She's devastated, as any 73-year-old woman might be. She's upset that, the jury found her responsible and guilty for second-degree murder.
Sandra Lane deserves the maximum penalty allowed. Please do not show mercy on her. Sandra Lane is pure evil, and if given the opportunity, would surely go again. She has no remorse or conscience. Her only concerns are for herself.
I don't know what else to say. I just don't know. I don't want to die in jail or prison.
On the charge of homicide, second-degree murder, that you serve 20 to 40 years in the state prison of Michigan.
The tragic story of Sandra and Jonathan has left many wondering what could have led to such a violent end between a grandmother and her grandson.
Who is it now?
Allegheny County Central Dispatch.
Okay, I strangled her. She's laying on the living room floor. You need to get law enforcement out there to do whatever they do with bodies.
Butch Knight was a man of contradiction. At first glance, he seemed like a jolly grandfather, but there was always something off about him. A strange air of secrecy and unpredictability seemed to surround him.
Just a grumpy old man.
I don't know what Sarah saw in him. I don't think she ever feared for physical damage, but he was so verbally abusive to her, even in front of other people.
People couldn't put their finger on it, but they knew he wasn't as harmless as he appeared.
You just don't tell Butch what you're going to do. He tells you what you're going to do. He kept her on a very short leash. She brought her paychecks home to him. He controlled everything. He controlled what they ate, where they lived, who she talked to on the phone. He would not even allow her to have enough pocket change to stop and have coffee with a friend.
Butch was a retired truck driver who lived in rural Finnville, Michigan. He was married to Sarah, a kind of caring woman who worked as a respiratory therapist. Despite their age difference, Sarah was 18 years younger than him. They seemed to have a happy marriage. At least that's what Butch wanted everyone to believe. Butch's dark side finally surfaced on the day of their anniversary.
She said that Butch was acting a little funny, but I told her, I said, Ma, your anniversary is coming up, so he probably has a surprise for you.
Sarah had mentioned that Butch was acting strange, but they all brushed it off, thinking it was just his way of keeping the surprise. But the surprise he had planned was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Butch had strangled Sarah to death and called 911 to report the crime. The 911 call came in unexpectedly to the authorities, but what was even more surprising was the chilling confession from the caller, Butch Knight.
I strangled her. She's dead and she's laying on the living room floor.
At first, the authorities thought it might be a hoax, but the call was too unusual to ignore, so they went to investigate.
It was an unusual call. People just don't call in to report that they committed homicide.
As they entered the living room, they saw a body under a sheet, and sure enough, when they pulled it back, they found Butch's wife, Sarah, dead on the floor. Obviously the victim of strangulation, such as Butch had told them.
Initially, we just saw a body under a sheet, and it was in the middle of the living room floor, obviously through strangulation.
Sarah's daughter, Roxanne, and her best friend, Ellen, were in disbelief.
Are you shocked? I can't think of a word that's big enough. I couldn't picture him doing it.
It's like somebody had just ripped my heart out because she was my baby sister.
They couldn't imagine that a person they knew would commit such a heinous act. The call from Butch had not only shattered their trust in him, but also raised questions about the nature of his relationship with Sarah. The detectives listened to Butch's 911 confession for the first time. They realized that he was a cold-blooded killer who had planned the murder and knew exactly what he was doing.
I strangled her. She's dead and she's laying on the living room floor.
What does this tell you about the person you thought he was? He's cold.
You need to get law enforcement out there to do whatever they do with bodies.
Whatever they do with bodies. That is so typical Butch. so cold and calculating and in charge and in control, and such an idiot. To be so callous and so cold as to refer to this woman that he's supposed to love as a dead body.
Butch called 911 immediately after the act, as if he wanted to prove something to himself, that he could get away with it. The detectives were surprised by his calculated actions and lack of remorse, as his confession showed no emotion. Butch had fled the scene, taking Sarah's car with him. The police launched a massive manhunt for him, but he seemed to have vanished into thin air. His 911 call gave them a clue about his location, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
And what's your name, please?
That's not important. I'm getting ready to leave the country.
Butch was on the run, and no one knew where he was or what he was planning.
Our investigation uncovered that he had visited their bank and he emptied his bank account out. It also showed that he had gone to a firing range, did some target practice, and purchased a weapon and ammunition.
That says what, Detective?
It tells me that he can be considered armed and dangerous at this time.
Scary.
Yes.
Butch's callous confession stunned everyone who knew him. Sarah's daughter Roxanne couldn't believe that the man she thought of as a father figure could do something so heinous. Sarah's best friend Ellen was inconsolable, devastated by the loss of her baby sister.
And she had left me a message on Facebook, which was kind of strange because all it said was, "I tried to call you." No explanation, no anything. I just wish every day that I had not missed that phone call, because I keep thinking in my mind that maybe that phone call was that call to say, "Ellen, I'm leaving, can you help me?" And I'll never know, because all I got was, "I tried to call you, and I wasn't there for her."
As the investigation continued, the detectives knew that the 911 call was a vital piece of evidence, as it gave them a glimpse into the mind of the killer. They analyzed every word, every pause, and every tone, looking for clues that would help them track down Butch Knight.
There were items and articles of hers that were placed near her, among which were a folder on a table that included phone numbers and addresses to family members for us to contact.
Scrapbooks, Post-its, details, as if he's playing some sort of game with you.
It was something that in 21 years with the sheriff's office, I've never seen the likes of.
The 911 call had revealed a different side to Butch, and it had shattered the image of the kind old man who lived down the street. It was clear that there was no more to him than met the eye, and the detectives were determined to get to the bottom of it. The 911 call was a haunting reminder of the brutal nature of the crime, and it would continue to play a significant role in the investigation that followed.
They'll catch him. He's not that smart.
You put him in a little box, and you leave him there.
Grandkids County 911, what's the address of the emergency?
Yes, ma'am. I just my daughter and all my grandkids, and I'll be sitting on my step. And then when you get here, I'm going to myself. Every one of them are.
You said your name is Dawn Spirit?
Yep.
All right, Dawn. What kind of gun do you have?
It doesn't matter what kind of gun I got. They're all. And then when you get here, I'll myself, and then you figure out what kind of gun it is.
Don Spirit was a troubled man with a criminal past that seemed to catch up with him in the most horrific way imaginable. He had a long history of violence, with previous arrests for battery, possession, and even shooting a man, but nothing could prepare the small town of Bell, Florida for what was about to unfold on September 18th, 2014. Don Spirit had been living with his daughter, Sarah Spirit, and her 6 children in a small mobile home in Bell. It was a close-knit community where everyone knew everyone else, and the family had been a fixture in the town for years. But something had changed in Don. He had become increasingly isolated, and he was seen as a bit of a recluse. Don Spirit's 911 call on September 18, 2014 was one of the most chilling and heart-wrenching calls in American history. The first thing that strikes you is the calm and matter-of-fact tone of his voice. It's as if he's talking about the weather, not the fact that he has just shot his daughter and all of his grandkids.
Can I have you stay on the phone with me?
No, not that. I'm waiting for them to get here. When they get here, I'm going to shoot myself on my back step. All I'm doing is waiting for them.
So you're sitting on your back steps?
Yep.
No one suspected the horror that was about to unfold when Don's spirit made that fateful 911 call. In a calm, almost matter-of-fact tone, he told the dispatcher,
I just shot my daughter and shot all my grandkids.
He gave his address of the mobile home and then added,
Every one of them are
when the dispatcher asked for his address, he gives it without hesitation,
2550 Northwest, 25 Terrace.
as if he has nothing to lose. And when she asked what kind of gun he has, he snapped back with,
It doesn't matter what kind of gun I got. They're all dead, and then when you get here, I'll shoot myself, and then you figure out what kind of gun it is.
It's clear from the call that Don's spirit had already decided that he was going to take his own life. He had nothing to live for. He had just killed his entire family, including 6 young children, and he was waiting for the police to arrive so he could end his own life. The dispatcher tried to keep him talking, to keep him on the line until the police arrived, but he was not interested.
I don't want to hear it, man. I'm done with every fucking thing. Just bring the motherfuckers out here, that's all. We got all the kids are in the house.
As the call continued, the dispatcher tried to get more information from Don's spirit. She asked him how long ago the shooting happened, but he didn't want to hear it. He just wanted the police to arrive so he could end his own life, finally confirming the number of victims and their ages.
6 kids, 1 adult.
6 kids and 1 adult?
Yeah. One of them is a baby.
Don's spirit told the dispatcher.
I'm waiting for them to get here. When they get here, I'm going to shoot myself on my back step.
The dispatcher whispers to her colleague as the reality of the situation sinks in. The tragic events that unfolded on that fateful day in Bell, Florida will forever be etched in the memories of those who lived through it. Don's spirit's troubled past and violent tendencies culminated in a heinous act that shocked the small community to its core. The 7 young lives that were taken far too soon will never be forgotten, and the trauma that their surviving loved ones must endure is immeasurable.